To identify with pure devotional services, he is speaking of something that's indirect. The indirect is part of the Vedas. It's propitiating devas to get something. And the ability of the devas to give that something comes from the source of everything. So it's indirect, meant to bring one to the direct. And then so again, in compare and contrast method, the explanation is given pure devotional service. And that's what this chapter is. Pure devotional service, change in heart. So the previous series of verses was, if you want this, worship this deva. If you want that, worship the other deva, etc., etc. Then if you want spiritual advancement to knowledge, then worship Vishnu, with the understanding that was discussed in chapter 1, which is through devotional service, naturally and spontaneously, devotional service awakens knowledge, transcendental knowledge, not knowledge of minutiae, but transcendental knowledge and detachment. Because in the indirect processes, knowledge, gyan, and detachment from the fruits of work, karma pala tyag, they're recommended without necessarily attaining the culmination, but they're valuable to move in that direction, indirect. However, when one takes the direct, knowledge awakens. Transcendental knowledge awakens. And knowledge is imperative. It's not optional. Knowledge is imperative. It's necessary for detachment. Now, one can strive for detachment without knowledge, but it doesn't stay. Why? Because living entities are parts of the Supreme. As part of the Supreme, there's a tendency to want to enjoy. And if we don't have knowledge, then knowledge becomes covered. Then knowledge or enjoyment is find some object out there and try to enjoy the object out there. And you have the life of fruitive activity, doing something to get something so I can enjoy. Karma. And then karma pala, and then be the enjoyer of the pala, of the karma. That's material life. So detachment is necessary for spiritual life. And detachment that sustains, knowledge is required. Knowledge guides the intelligence, which guides the mind, which guides the senses, and thus detachment. Without knowledge, it's not sustainable. One may artificially, out of frustration or otherwise, kick out this or that or the other. And then it comes back because it's not sustainable. Not resting upon knowledge, and knowledge is resting upon bhakti. Or bhakti is the basis and support of both karma and gyan. Bhagavad Gita. So now we're going to move on to chapter 3, text number 9. This is more of the dominating through material, then contrast is devotional service. Translation for text 9. One who desires domination over a kingdom, in case you wanted to desire to dominate over a kingdom or an empire, just in case, you should worship the Manus. One who desires victory over an enemy should worship the demons, in case you want to really be good at victory over enemies. One who desires sense gratification, yes, sense gratification, worship the moon. But one who desires nothing of material enjoyment should worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purusham param. Purusham param. This connects back with the introductory verses of the first canto. Satyam param dhimahi. Purusham param. Akama purusham param. Purport. For the liberated person, all the enjoyments listed above are considered to be absolutely useless. Only those who are conditioned by the material modes of external energy are captivated by different types of material enjoyment. In other words, the transcendentalist has no material desires to be fulfilled, whereas the materialist has all types of desires to be fulfilled. The Lord has proclaimed that the materialists who desire material enjoyment and thus seek the favor of different demigods, as above mentioned, are not in control of their senses and so give themselves to nonsense. One should therefore not desire any sort of material enjoyment, being sensible enough to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Prabhupada's strong. The leaders of nonsensical persons are still more nonsensical because they preach openly and foolishly that one can worship any form of demigod and get the same result. They even have a slogan. Same result. This sort of preaching is not only against the teachings of Bhagavad Gita or those of Srimad Bhagavatam, but it is also foolish, just as it is foolish to claim that with the purchase of any travel ticket one may reach the same destination. No one can reach Bombay from Delhi by purchasing a ticket for Baroda. It is clearly defined herein that persons impregnated with different desires have different modes of worship. But one who has no desire for material enjoyment should worship the Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna, the Personality of Godhead. And this worshipping process is called devotional service. Pure devotional service means service to the Lord without any tinge of material desire, including the desire for fruitive activity and empiric speculation, karma again, right? For fulfillment of material desires, one may worship the Supreme Lord, but the result of such worship is different, as will be explained in the next verse, celebrated verse, the Akama Sarvakamova verse. Generally, the Lord does not fulfill anyone's material desire for sense enjoyment, but he awards such benedictions to worshippers of the Lord, for they ultimately come to the point of not desiring material enjoyment. The conclusion is that one must minimize the desire for material enjoyment, and for this one should worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is described here as Param, or beyond anything material. Sripad Shankaracharya has also stated, Narayana Paro Vyaktat. The Supreme Lord is beyond the material encirclement. Likely, the followers of Adi Shankaracharya have a different rendering of that statement than Vaishnava's rendering of that statement. And it probably has something to do with, I don't know, it probably has something to do with what is Narayana. If your position, since the position is there's nothing but Brahman, then it's another way of saying Brahman is beyond the manifest. And Narayan is Brahman, because everything is Brahman, so Narayana Paro Vyaktat. End of story. However, our understanding of Narayan is different than the undifferentiated Brahman. Narayan is the pratishta of the undifferentiated Brahman, and both Narayan and Brahman are beyond the vyakta, the manifest state of material existence. So Shukadeva Goswami is not in a courtroom, but he's building a case. And the case is in response to the question of Shukadeva, of Maharaj Parikshit. What's the duty of a person about to die? And what is that subject matter that one should hear, chant, and always remember? Now, the body of the Vedas is vast. And in that vast body of the Vedas, there are different sections. In simple terms, Karmakanda, Jnanakanda, and Upasanakanda. So in the vast Karmakanda section, it advocates the indirect. Discussed this a little bit yesterday. Even Krishna, because he presents the Vedas, when he was in Dwarka, as an adult with wives and palaces and families and things, he worshipped the Devas. He propitiated the Devas each morning by proper rituals with proper brahmanas to conduct those activities, although they're indirect, because it's within the Vedas. So he's going to follow what's in the Vedas because he presented the Vedas, and the Vedas are eternal truths. So these processes that are indirect, they're eternal truths. The creation comes into being, it stays for some time, it goes out of being, yet it exists. We don't call it false. It exists, but it's temporary, and the fruits of worshipping the Devas, it's also limited and temporary, because the whole production is limited and temporary, and those overseeing it are limited and temporary, and the fruits they can give are limited and temporary, and therefore those that have done that for some time, what's the benefit? There are several benefits in the indirect process. One of the benefits is, listen carefully, one of the benefits is, if I do this particular indirect, I get something in this life and the next life. And as one becomes purified, more elevated in the quality of goodness, that's the intention or the design behind, I start to think, well, I'm doing all these things for this life and the next life. That means there's something beyond this life. What's that something that's beyond this life? And how do I benefit that? So it leads to, potentially it leads to, inquisitiveness into what is eternal. What is it that moves on to the next life? And how do I benefit that? So then it leads to Jnanakanda, the elevation in the quality of goodness by approaching higher authority to fulfill desires, rather than the unregulated, it's the regulated by the codes of the Vedas to fulfill, the wants of living beings. Thus, the Vedas are sometimes compared to a desire tree to fulfill desires. That's what desire trees do. Go to a desire tree, I want X, Y, Z, and here comes X, Y, Z. At least there's a procedure. And of course, benedictions are in the hand of those who give them, but the demigods are quite liberal to give those who follow the codes of the Vedas. So there's something that's beyond this life. If there's something that's beyond this life, what is that something? How do I directly benefit that something besides making a better situation in this and the next life? Potentially, there's no guarantee, but potentially that can come. And then comes the Jnanakanda section. So a thinner slice of the Vedic pie is the Jnanakanda section, where the followers want to understand Brahman. The goal even of the demigod worship is to come to that stage. Atato Brahma Jigyasa, all the Vedas are meant to inquire into Brahman. And when knowledge of Brahman is sought, one may not, one may come to the right conclusion. Bahunam janmanam ante Gyanavan mam prapajate. What is that conclusion? Vasudev sarvamiti. This Brahman, of which I am a part, has its basis and support. And the basis and support is Vasudeva. Vasudeva is the source of everything. And then in the association of a devotee, one may not also, one may take up devotional service. That's a long route, long path, and it's lots of detours to get to the destination, and one may not get to the destination. Certainly not a guarantee. Just like in the direct process, those more intelligent, therefore it's said regularly, especially by our founder Acharya, the most intelligent persons are those who just directly take up devotional service. Why the indirect that has many detours and you may never get there? Even with devotional service, there's curves in the road, and there's bumps in the road, and there's no guarantee you're going to get across the finish line. But there is certainly a guarantee by devotional service that spiritual progress is permanent, in contrast to material progress is not permanent. Antavatu palam tesham. So the benefits are quite impermanent. So the advocacy of Shukadev Goswami to Maharaj Parikshit, which means to us because we're also about to die. Ultimately, we're going to die. And then what? What preparation are we making for that? Just like there's a lot of investment in parenting that children get a good education, naturally, because they want them to prepare for their next life, their adult life. And then after this life, what's next? We want for those who we care about to have become better situated. And therefore, these pious parents want to see their children not become fanatics, but to do something that lends them to prosperity in their adult life and in their next life. I met one student, there's many, but one student who was very honest. He said, I started taking part in the bhakti club at school because I had been trained I will do better in school, and I'll prosper better from the fruits of my education if I do pious things. So here's a good pious thing, so I'll go do this pious thing because it'll help me prosper. And I did that for, quite some time. I just couldn't hear the transcendence message. But slowly, I started to understand the transcendence message. And then I started to slacken in my academics, which is what parents are worried about. But then, my teacher helped me understand, no. You must, there was a rule in that particular Bhakti Yoga Club, you must excel in your academics because other students want to excel in academics, and if they see you're involved in Bhakti and you're slacking in your academics, they'll stay away from Bhakti. So it's a duty to help inspire them. And there's other reasons. But so I got back into doing my studies for Krishna as an example of, here's a Krishna Bhakta. And I put 2 and 2 together and I got 4. It really makes sense. So the student went on and became a nice Hare Krishna devotee. But it started with just thinking this is some pious activity. And that happens in our congregations, not just among students, isn't it? People come because they know it's pious. They come to the temple to take darshan of the deity. They make some offering of something, put something in the hundi box, say a few prayers, and do whatever their training is from childhood, and on off they go. It's it's an investment in their piety bank account, and that's how they're thinking. It's quite okay. It's not the highest platform. That's the next verse. Sarva kamova. So if supposing one has lots of desires, go to the source. The indirect is not required. The direct is required. And even if the motivation is sarva kama, go to the source. Go to Krishna. The difficulty, there's many difficulties. One of those difficulties is once that which is desired is achieved, then one can check out. Thank you, Krishna. See you later. Been nice getting benefits from you. See you later. That can happen. Or by bad association, one gets distracted into the unlimited facilities of objects out there that come to one. Access to them comes to one who has prosperity or has piety, and then get distracted by the objects. There's risk any path you take, is the point. There's risk in the bhakti path as well, the direct bhakti path. Largely, those risks have to do with what's inside, not what's outside. Although we may point to what's outside, and that's the risk is what's inside. And, the desires separate from Krishna is strong. That's why we're here. And how to free oneself from those desires separate from Krishna. In essence, that's what these earlier verses of chapter 3 are discussing. And there's facilities. There's paths to move on to fulfill those desires separate from the desire to please Krishna. So you could not just say most of us, all of us have desires separate from Krishna. Otherwise we wouldn't be in the material world. So what do you do about that? And that's the next verse. But the principle is direct devotional service is the best method, the best standard by which to live one's life. And what that standard looks like is very nicely described in this chapter. Pure devotional service, change in heart. So that the heart's orientation then will result in Krishna giving intelligence that can then direct the mind, can direct the senses, can guide your life. So it's the heart's inclination towards Krishna. And then the practice, the sadhana part, the sadhana stage. Practice directing everything simply to Krishna. Practice, the motivation behind that everything is directed to Krishna, is simply for Krishna's satisfaction, acknowledging that there's something else going on besides that exclusively, but gradually moving towards, striving to move towards Krishna alone is to be pleased. And then even in that realm, there's degrees and there's magnifying that desire in various ways, particularly in rasa-oriented ways. I came across something in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu this yesterday that I thought I would share. It relates to this. In a section of Bhakti, because Bhakti Rasa Amrita Sindhu, in the Bhakti section dealing with sadhana, there's a description of, in the sadhana stage, we engage our body, deha, and senses, indriyas, in Krishna's service. And if the purpose behind that sadhana is clear, that is, to gain the association of Krishna in some form or fashion, awaken our relationship with Krishna, then Krishna reciprocates. You can say, what happens if you don't have that clarity of purpose? It's a slow awakening and purification process. But as that purpose of pleasing Krishna awakens, and that's the purpose behind what we do in sadhana, using our bodies, then Krishna reciprocates accordingly. So an example that's given by Rupa Goswami to illustrate, use their body with the longer term purpose of having direct interaction with Krishna. He refers to a place in Scripture, he doesn't say where. In a place in Scripture there was a carpenter who took it as his karma that he would not have a son. Instead, he, using proper procedures, abhishek, etc., he installed the deity in his home as with Krishna as his son. As a result of that, using his body to worship Krishna as his son, in his next life, he got the opportunity to be born as a cowherd in Braja, and during that 1 year, when Krishna became the cowherd boys, Krishna became his son, Rupa Goswami. That didn't happen during his lifetime, but Krishna recognized that desire and that mood, the internal mode of cultivation. He was using his body in that particular way, and he achieved that consequence, or that result, spiritual result. He wasn't praying to Krishna in his deity form, please allow me to have a son. No, it's not if one does that, shame on that person that does that. It's just describing the orientation of the heart towards Krishna results in Krishna's reciprocation with the heart. And it may not be, as quickly as one may want it to be, or unfold in the way that we imagine it should be, or something like that. But Krishna is omniscient, and Krishna is very loving, and Krishna reciprocates. It's meant to illustrate using your deha, your material form, and senses in service unto Krishna in a particular mood of desire. He gives a second example in the same shloka of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu of a king. I can't recall the king's name, but the king had a particular type of bhakti. So the king wanted Krishna as his son, so what he did was, with proper procedures, he installed the deity of Krishna as the king, a deity of Krishna as the king. So Krishna could be his son, and he could serve Krishna. He was the king, but in his consciousness, Krishna was the king, and he was his son. He had no sons. So Krishna was the son, and Krishna became the king. And Rupa Goswami then says, then Krishna spoke to him, I am your son. Doesn't elaborate, but that's... Now, Rupa Goswami is the writer of this, and Rupa Goswami is teaching us how similarly we can perform sadhana and in a proper way, where the goal is the consciousness that we're carrying while we're engaging in the activities, the external activities of sadhana bhakti. The essence of sadhana bhakti is not activity per se. It includes activity, but it's the consciousness behind the activity. Just using again the example of deity worship. So our pujaris can develop the highest stage of Krishna bhakti through the medium of the service, but it's not just the service, it's the consciousness and cultivation of a relationship connected with that service. Same for the persons who come and see the deity. They can see it, they can have a conception of seeing the deity as a type of pious activities that will help me prosper. And so I do the thing that you're supposed to do. I bring some flowers or bring some bag of grain or bring something. And this is, patram pushpam palam toyam. That's what Krishna says, so I do. And what's the result? I'm going to get some piety. So in this life I'll prosper, in the next life the fruits of piety. That's the essence, or a big part of the essence of the story of King Nriga. He was a Krishna Bhakta. And he had his other foot in the second boat. The second boat was giving in charity. And the purpose behind the giving in charity was prosperity in this life and the next. He was mixed, karmakanda and bhakti. So he got the fruit of his bhakti, and he got the fruit of his karmakanda. And the fruit of his karmakanda came in the form of Krishna arranged for him to make a mistake in his rituals of charity. He gave a cow, he gave many cows, a very large number of cows every day. Where he kept those cows, who can say? But he kept so many cows and gave in cows, so many cows daily to brahmanas, and so much wealth and gold and jewels and ornaments and clothing and so many things. He was very, 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 that's 4 varies, charitable. But one day, misfortune. One of the cows he gave wandered from the brahmana, went back in the herd, he gave it to a second brahmana. And then when the second brahmana was seen by the first brahmana, wait a minute, that's my cow. I don't know how we distinguish which cow is whose and anything, but that's my cow. No, it's my cow. Let's go to the king and settle it. The king understood. I made a mistake. Please forgive me. I can go to a serious hell if you don't forgive me. Please, please, please forgive me. And here, I'll give you 1,000 cows of the best quality for each of you. Please give that one cow back to me. He's begging charity from a brahmana. No. So at the end of his life, he had to meet Yamaraj, because he had that foot in that Karmakanda boat. Yamaraj said, you're a superlative person, but you made this mistake. So you have to take responsibility for it. Which would you like? Enjoy the fruits of your piety in the heavenly realm, or finish the reaction for this misdeed. So he said, well, I'll take the misdeed and then I'll just prosper. So he became a lizard. Poof, just like that, it says. He immediately transformed into a lizard. And long time later, because according to the Bhagavatam, according to two places in the Bhagavatam, he was the son of Ikshvaku. So Ikshvaku was long ago gone. Not only a previous yuga, but a previous yuga cycles. So anyway, he was a lizard in the bottom of a well. The boys, Krishna's sons, were out playing and became thirsty and saw the lizard and asked Krishna to lift him out. They felt sorry for the poor lizard at the bottom of the well. He was big as a mountain. Krishna touched him. He transformed into King Nriga. Krishna asked, as if he didn't know, who are you? You're showing this form like a demigod. And you're in the bottom of a well like a lizard. How did that happen? Who are you? So he gave his story. I'm the famous King Nriga. You probably have heard of me. A little proud. Oh, was I charitable, and then this misfortune happened. And so I had to become a lizard. And now that you have touched me, that curse of becoming a lizard, or the reaction, because some say it's just a karmic reaction. Some say it was because this story is told in other Puranas. Some say it was a curse of the Brahmanas. Anyway, so what happened? He asked permission from Krishna. An airship descended, Vimana, and took him off to the heavenly planets to enjoy the prosperity of his so much charity. And Krishna benedicted, and when you're finished with all of that, you can come to me. But he didn't go straight to Krishna because he still had this, and had this aspiration. He had not yet become a pure devotee, but that contact with Krishna, that hankering is exactly what's being described here. That hankering for material enjoyment had dissipated, gone. But he still had to engage for some time in the heavenly realm. And who knows, there may have been some service for him to Krishna in the heavenly realm of some situation. We don't know. Not described. So there's consequences for following the indirect method. But the benefit is to bring one to the direct method. And we're very fortunate, by the mercy of our founder Acharya, to come in direct contact with the direct method and work from there. And we have, a distance to go. That's quite okay. We're on the path, that's the direct method, and it's meant to take us to Krishna. Just stay on track. See if there's some discussion. It's 8:30.
I have a question.
You have a question.
Ask that one. I take a lot of help, or this Falastuti from these chapters. Some examples are, when we are distributing Bhagavatam, I say it is Punya Shavana Kirtana, you will get a lot of piety. And another example is even in Manasiksha, Raghunath Das Goswami says that you'll get, if you want to go back to Krishna, these verses help. So I take a lot of help on this Falastuti and promote that. Is that okay?
Yes. Now, how people take it and how you take it may be different. Prabhupada's explanation of in book distribution, whatever you say, it's not exaggeration. Now they may take it. He gave the example. A businessman may say, "Rub this on your head; it'll make your hair grow." But in the case of glorification of the Bhagavatam, there's no exaggeration. Now, how people will take it is up to them. But, to encourage them, of course, from wherever they are, same as it's right in the Bhagavatam, one who hears this something, something. I've been in devotee audiences, I forget which chapter, in the 10th canto, but, at the very end, there's this Palastuti. One will become free from all anxiety. And the audience went, ah. But, they know it's philosophy, but one who even hears once, one becomes freed from something. No harm. Yes?
The other question is,
Keep speaking.
when sometimes we do encourage indirect process, maybe they are attached to the indirect process or this way or that way. So I am understanding you're saying that they may not come to bhakti. There is a possibility in that process may not come to bhakti. So the saving point is that is understanding the temporality of the the gifts from the indirect process, like there is a death coming or there is eternal space, like that. So is that the right way to, like, basically when we are encouraging indirect process, knowing that there is that thing that they will not come to bhakti, so but then the saving point is encourage that there is some eternal space, there is a death going to come. Is that a good way to approach?
You know my answer. It depends. In principle, we don't encourage indirect. However, as a hook to bring one to direct, we may honor, regard, but then on the other hand, depends. One may get very strong. Look at the language, nonsense, right in the purport. So it depends. Depends on you, it depends on the situation, depends on the person, depends on the circumstance, depends on your relationship. It depends. There are different ways of encouraging. That's very good. Have you considered, or have you considered that this indirect is limited and temporary? Let's go to Bhagavad Gita. Depends how we, if somebody is to be encouraged and how that encouragement might look, or to discourage the indirect and encourage direct, or while they're doing this, do that. See how it works for you. Depends.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj, this point you made, how knowledge is imperative for detachment. So what I find with my family members, especially like my older uncles and aunts and even my mother, they're all chanting because I recommended or I've, suggested.
They're attached to you. That's fine.
But
That's
they
fine.
don't have any inclination to gain knowledge why they're chanting, or should I try? I try to help them. They're taking some Gujarati Bhagavad Gita classes with Kathamrita Mataji, but they don't seem so inclined to know. But they want to chant.
Fine. They're pious. They're inclined to chant. You know what's behind it? Behind that piety, why they are inclined to chant? It could be a number of reasons. They know it's pious. By their upbringing, they know it's pious, and so they like to do that which is pious. That's fine. So then slowly, hearing Bhagavad Gita classes, or, so many different ways that you can try. I can make some suggestions, but, you can, there's no harm. Send little message that, they may see, our relative is passing on some pious message. Or whatever. It's just nourish that seed that's inclined because of piety to take this as a pious good thing. You can, you can try, for example, another door to knock on is offer their food. And the purpose is this. So that's a door they may not want to open. It's a door they may want to open. If they want to open it, here's the purpose. So, and as life becomes not just a series of rituals that are pious and lead to piety and prosperity in this the next life, if knowledge can be awakened through different doors, worshipping of a deity, and then the purpose. So it depends. So, but continue to encourage. Yeah. Here's another monthly or bi-weekly or weekly or something. A little passage. Titrate little messages that are in relation to, items of knowledge connected to chanting. Or because there's reverence for Bhagavad Gita in Gujarati families, minimally because Gandhi revered Bhagavad Gita, so little messages, not necessarily from his rendering, but little messages, little ones, that values knowledge or the fruit of knowledge. Okay. Something else? You have something? Okay.
My question was, when we hear these extreme reactions for the mistakes in the Bhagavatam, for killing Nruga, but not of his own mistake, he has to suffer. So, or he has to take that punishment. So, my mistakes is much bigger, even knowingly. It sometimes it's very scary, right? Is this they are given in Bhagavatam for us to? Is that how generally the reaction is going to be, or is it just to teach a lesson?
It's to teach a lesson, but the lesson may not be a scare tactic. I never perceived hearing that story as, it's a lesson. Anyway, we're individuals and it's going to impact us differently. It's an important, come to the stage of unalloyed bhakti. And if there's mixed bhakti, then there's a detour, and where you go may be a detour place. It depends. No, Krishna can Krishna could have done all kinds of different things to make this story narrate differently, and maybe in another day of Brahma it works out altogether differently. But there's lesson. And the consequence of karma kanda isn't, besides it's limited and temporary, there's the opportunity for making some unintentional mistake. And unintentional mistake has its consequences as much as the piety has its consequences. And then there's a way to absolve one of the unintentional mistakes, but that's also another lesson. The purpose is to draw our attention to Krishna, of unlimited, unrestricted attention in Krishna. And there's degrees, and there's nomenclature for those.
Can I ask another
Sure.
question? So when we are in some challenging situations, we understand that there is a lesson for us to learn.
Yes.
Even after knowing that and going to ask Krishna again, removing that obstacle,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it looks like cheating myself. I mean,
Well, what to do? Don't beat yourself up because I didn't learn my lesson. I just want the obstacle to go away. It's the stage that we are in, each of one of us, the stage that each one of us is in bhakti, is itself a lesson that we need to learn, and the opportunities to learn will keep coming again and again and again and again and again and again and again until we learn. There may be intervals of time, but they'll come again till we learn. And that learning is a higher consciousness position. So we have to act according to our capacity while we're striving for the higher consciousness objective. So it's in our hands, or it's up to us, or it's our relationship with Krishna. And what do you want that relationship? The strongest fuel or propellant is our aspiring for an unobstructed relationship with Krishna. There's nothing stronger than that. Something else?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. You gave those 2-3 stories about the examples of some devotees who chose to make Krishna or worshipped Krishna as their son or worshipped Krishna as a king, and so they attained their perfection. And then there are other examples, like the one about a devotee who lived about a couple of 100 years ago in Guruvayur, who had a son at an old age, and he passed away very quickly, and he was very grief-stricken. And
The son.
the father, because
The son departed.
the baby, he died as a baby.
Okay.
After the baby was born, the
Okay.
baby died, and so he was the father was a great devotee, and he was very grief-stricken because Krishna was his entire life, and in his old age he decided he had this still desire to have a child, and Krishna reciprocated, gave him the child, and child died. And so it took some time for him to get over the grief, and then he wrote a very famous poem, and in that he said, when Krishna as a child is playing in my heart, what is the need for me to have any other children? That was the punchline in the beautiful poem that he wrote. So he came to that realization, and studying about his life history and the way he left his body and all that, looks like he was going in the direction of Krishna without any question. So there are, the change of heart, the change in the orientation of the heart that happens in the case of devotees who have either deliberately chose to worship Krishna as their son, or somebody in their life, the way Krishna reciprocated to them is by taking away something which was very precious. All of this is, there is like a real interaction between the heart of a devotee and the heart of Krishna. So it plays out in different ways.
Yes.
And you just now said an unobstructed attraction towards Krishna. And so ultimately, somehow or other, seeing that purity of thought or single purpose, Krishna reciprocates. And that's when this complete change in heart happens, right? It is not like by somebody's effort alone.
Well, it's both. You can't rule out the effort. We can't rule out Krishna's reciprocation. It's both. It's a relationship. And there's choices in any relationship or any activity, and it's relationship. And Krishna's choosing, Krishna's ready, and he's reciprocating. But choice is very important. This is another big topic. Is bhakti, I want to go into it right now, because at the end of the class, is bhakti our actual nature, or is bhakti bestowed? So it's both. It's our nature, and it's nurtured. So anyway, I have to, modify or comment on. It's not any. It's nothing that one can do. It's bestowed, and that's it. Or if it's not bestowed, that's it.
I think I saw an article on that you had sent. So it is both, and yet it feels love is in the heart of all the living entities, and loving is that nature is there in everyone, and so how could it not be there within the heart of living entities in any case? Because
that's we're in the same team, but there's some persons who say no. Anyway,
okay,
because I'm looking at the clock and it's late, and
there is one other quick question, a practical one, if you could.
Okay, quick.
We train, we practice, and we share all this knowledge from Srimad Bhagavatam, and everything to all the devotees who come to our temple. And sometimes it doesn't really register in the sense that, we are guiding. And an example of this is a practical thing I'm asking about. Somebody may go, one of our people may see something, they go to a demigod worship place, and they see that administratively those people are doing something which is more efficient than us. Now, we have what Srila Prabhupada given us, a standard of worship for the deities, and our pujaris are busy doing all of that. It's not like they sit here and all the time we don't see them, interacting with the public, because they have so many other things to do, which is necessary. And yet, if our people feel that somebody else out there is doing something right, and we should take that as an example in our temple, it's difficult because the thing is what we are doing is totally different. So how do you guide? I give a straight answer. We don't need to. There is no reason to take guidance from such source. Oh no, but we can take guidance from any source if that looks somewhat more practical than what you are doing here. When I get an answer like that, how do you guide? Because these are people who are trained here.
My answer, it depends. How you answer depends. And if there, you're saying efficient. I don't know exactly what that means, and I don't need it. For example, just keep it in principle. If something can be done efficiently, that's not inconsistent with our the siddhanta and the padhatis of archana, that's just fine. But we have our procedures. So our faith depends on the person and the point that's being brought up, and so many other variable depends on. But what a simple answer is the teachings on our procedures, if it's specific to deity worship, it comes from Hari Bhakti Vilas, which was compiled by Gopal Bhatta, following the exact procedures in Sri Rangam, and it was customized to follow the teachings of Lord Chaitanya by Sanatan Goswami. So the combination of those two, and that's our procedure. And through that procedure, here's the goal. So we don't need to modify. We don't need to be smarter than these great acharyas. And if somebody else is doing something that works for them, fine. And we follow the procedures given to us by these exalted acharyas, the fruit of which is perfection in bhakti. So can we learn from others that do things very nicely? Well, we can respect. And if there's some portion of what they do that it fits well, and it conforms, it's in alignment with Hari Bhakti Vilas and our acharyas' methods that are fully replete in scriptural references. So there may be some other scriptural references, some other following is different, that's fine. We don't disrespect it, but we have full faith and full regard for the authorities of Scripture, the rendering of those authorities of Scripture, and our following of those authorities from Scripture in our disciplic mind. We respect others. Now that may sit well, it may not sit well. They may keep saying it again for the next 15 years, and that's up to them. And they may say, look, you people, you're rigid, and I'm out of here. We'll be respectful that they want to do something differently. It depends on the person. And a big part of their acceptance is not their faith in our disciplic succession, but it has a lot to do with their faith in you as a person and a leader of a group of persons. You're representative of that disciplic succession, and your character, your disposition, your qualities has a big impact on whether they'll accept whatever you say. And their stubbornness has another big factor. I don't care. You got to do it. You got to be like me. And I'm this eclectic person that I take wherever I can, and that's me. So you should do like me. Some people are stubborn. You just smile. And they'll continue or they'll not continue. They'll be happy or they'll not be happy. That's their choice. We're followers. we're respectful. That others have a different method and, whatever, fine. We're very faithful. And that's who I am as a leader. That's who we are as an organization. We're not disrespectful, so please don't disrespect. We follow. Please respect that. Depends. Relationships. I understand in a practical sense. You're building a temple, and when you're building a temple, you're inviting people in who really haven't started with ABCs and Krishna Bhakti per ISKCON manners. So they're bringing ideas, and how you as a leader help them to digest. This is the manner. It's a delicate position, an important position, because once something starts to ripple out there that they're unreasonable and they're rigid and they're disrespectful and all those things that people are going to say anyways, because they say those because it's Kali Yuga. So that's going to happen, but you do your best to help them respect the adherence to. And if there is something that can be done better, we're happy to do it better, as long as it's in conformity and in alignment with that which is perfection. And I'm not going to try to improve that which is perfection. That would be very presumptuous. Well, respecting other people do things in a different way for whatever the reasons. And whether what they're doing is in conformity with their line, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to judge that. Who knows if things got twisted or changed or whatever. My responsibility is that which Lord Chaitanya, the gift that Lord Chaitanya gave, and those who are his intimate associates and followers, the method and practice and procedures, we follow that. I just looking, it's 9:00. About 2 weeks ago, there was a wedding in the Potomac Temple between one South Indian family and another South Indian family, their son and daughter. One came from Australia, the other was from the US. And the pujari somehow find out or knew or whatever the rituals that South Indians like. And he just all the mantras and all the procedures and exact timings and everything according to their liking, which is not our Gaudiya style. I mean, I saw something that I never saw before. Maybe you saw it before, but the bride, who's like 27 or something like that, sits on the lap of her father. And there's certain mantras, da-da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da. And I'm turning my daughter over to her new shelter, and she stands. And so it's a ritual, and it's a very important part of. So we can accept it because it's not out of alignment, and that there's a certain tradition. So that's fine. But, when it's not that, we do this. Because we do this, that's Hari Bhakti Vilasa, is given to us by our choice. We have our mantras, we have our procedures. And it can be done simpler, it can be done more elaborately, and so forth. Just like deity installations can be 3 days. Or it can be 1 hour. Or somewhere in between. And it's not like this is right. If this is right, then that's wrong, and vice versa. So there can be flexibility, provided there's conformity and if there's not inconsistency. And on occasion, we may do something. But we have our standard. And that's who we are. That's who we are, with a smile. And good character. And good demeanor. Respect. No disrespect. If they throw disrespect at you, you smile. being a leader in a situation like this certainly has its, opportunities and its challenges. Because people want to, impose something and judge something, and they're successful people and they have their convictions, and they want to see their convictions superimposed upon something that they're going to support. Otherwise, I'm not sure I'm going to support. That's okay. Okay, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.